So hello, this is Dr. Ford Brewer with PrevMed, Prevention of Heart Attack, Stroke, and Disability. In fact, why don't you prevent all those diseases and have a long, healthy life? That's exactly what we're talking about tonight. The science of anti-aging. And it has something to do with resveratrol. You remember people talking about that chemical in the skin of red grapes? And if you're going to drink wine, you should drink red wine because it has resveratrol. Well, here's the fellow that discovered that. His name is David Sinclair. He's tenured faculty at Harvard, born in Australia, educated at University of New South Wales. Came to the U.S. to get further a Ph.D. at Harvard and then do some postdoc work in aging of yeast. Now, why aging of yeast? We'll talk about that in just a minute. This is to help set us up for that discussion. Now, if you look at all of the chronic diseases, the killer diseases of mankind, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, chronic lung disease, all these diseases actually they start increasing dramatically at middle age. The anti-aging researchers have noticed this. The folks with the TAME study, the gerontologists of the world, all notice the same thing. It's not any one disease that's killing us. It's all of them. There's something going on that's common to all of our cells. So this is happening at a cellular level. We're getting some breakdown. So again, back to Dr. Sinclair. He's, again, working on metabolism of the cells in relation to aging. As I said, he trained at Harvard, did some post-grad at MIT, looking at yeast aging. He discovered a thing called Sirtuins. We'll talk about those in a minute. He also discovered that NADH, nicotinamide, and we'll remember where that is in just a minute too. These things are very important in terms of aging. The sirtuins have to do with enzymes that cut off, they control the expression of other enzymes, which have to do with, guess what, metabolism. In March of this year, Dr. Sinclair and his team discovered NMN. It's related to resveratrol. In fact, it's supposed to be a much better form of resveratrol. It's an NADH precursor and booster. They'll take it to clinical trials within 6 months. So we'll be doing a trial on another anti-aging drug. Remember, the last one we talked about was old-fashioned metformin. Now, let's go back to resveratrol. What does it do? It's the stuff in the red skin of the grapes. When it goes through the cell membrane, it impacts SIRT1, one of the 7 sirtuins. We'll talk about those in a minute. And that, in turn, boosts the mitochondria. These are remember, the powerhouse of the cell. Well, let's go back and ask a quick question. Why didn't resveratrol work? Or why are we not hearing about resveratrol that much anymore? Well, here's why. In order to get enough impact from resveratrol through red wine, you'd have to drink 100 cups a day. I'm sure that that's a great setup for a joke. I'm sure a lot of people would want to volunteer, but again, totally impractical. So let's move ahead. What are sirtuins? They're SIRTs. They have 1 through 7. The yeast SIRT that Dr. Sinclair discovered in his postdoc work at MIT was SIRT1. SIRT2 is the analog that humans have. It's the same thing, but it's slightly different. It stimulates autophagy. Well, it stands for silent information regulation. That doesn't tell us a whole lot, but again, what it does, you don't really see the enzyme itself so much as it repressing or stimulating other enzymes being transcribed and developed genetically. It stimulates autophagy. You know, think fasting. When we fast, we get an increase of the SIRTs. And autophagy, you might remember, probably don't, but you might remember, that's where the cell starts taking up trash, old used up proteins that aren't being used anymore, and burning it for energy. So it burns old parts, worn out parts of the cell for energy. It inhibits inflammation, and I won't go through how it does that, but again, inflammation is being found to be one of the key components of aging, along with our metabolic, our cell respiration, how our cells get energy. This is an epigenetic process. It doesn't change the genes themselves, but it changes the spools that the genes are wound up on and results in downregulation of some of the inflammatory processes. Resveratrol, by the way, activates SIRT1, but again, as we mentioned, you just can't get enough of it for it to be very helpful. Quick spoiler warning, just maybe 30 seconds for the biochemical nerds in the group. You remember this is the mitochondria. You remember it's the powerhouse of the cell, and you remember there are three major components of our metabolic process. The first component, glycolysis, is used by yeast and cancer cells. That's why they do a low glycemic or low carb diet for a lot of cancer patients. It only gets the equivalent of what we call 2 ATP out of a glucose molecule. Then we have the TCA cycle or Krebs cycle, again another 2. It's the electron transport, which requires oxygen. That's why we need oxygen to breathe. It gets 34 out of the bunch. Now, why did I go through all that? Because of NAD, nicotinamide dehydrogenase. That's the chemical that we're talking about, that we're boosting with NMN. This is another view of that, and thank you for your patience if you were bored with the biochemistry part. Let's go back now and just see if we can connect a few dots. As you see from this headline, high glucose, this is a very academic article that I found while I was doing some research on this. The title is interesting to read when you start looking at this and some of the other videos that we've done recently. High glucose induced alteration of SIRTs in endothelial cells, causes rapid aging in B3 and FOXO regulated pathway. So, high glucose. Remember, we're also looking at glucose in a couple of other places, like Valter Longo's search, where he's looking to decrease diabetes through intermittent fasting. And, of course, Dr. Nir Barzilai's research, where he's using metformin. Endothelial inflammation. So obviously endothelial inflammation is a big deal for us just on a working basis right here in our clinic, where we're decreasing heart attack and stroke risk. And just a reminder on these two, I've got another video where I talk about Valter Longo and intermittent fasting, the product that's called Proline. One of the major impacts is to increase that FOXO pathway. So again, you're starting to see we're connecting a lot of dots in terms of research in anti-aging in the past few years. And they tend to focus on the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell respiration, or the way the cell gets energy for the body. Thank you.